morning everyone, and welcome to our Facebook Live on Focus. So a little different change of scenery since I'm now working from home. So normally when you see me there's a different set of pictures behind me, but now I'm home and I'm in the basement, so the light's not quite as good, so apologies for that, but with everybody sharing the same space, it's most likely that I will be least disturbed down here, which is one of the most important things that we're thinking about when we're also thinking about focus. So there are a few things I wanted to talk about today that are all around helping you think about the focus side of things. But before I kind of get into the tips piece, there's just a couple of things I wanted to say. So if you have questions while you're watching, please feel free to type them in. I'm going to try and watch the screen while I'm also talking, and I'll answer as many questions as I can for you. We are going to record, this is being recorded obviously, so we'll be able to keep this and put it up on the E3 page, and also likely to put it out in the newsletter that's going to go out next week as well. So if you haven't had a chance to watch this live, don't worry, you'll have time to come back to it if you need to at a later date. It's not unusual right now with everything that's going on to be concerned about focus. So with everything that's happening, our brains are wired for threat. So as soon as COVID hit, your brain is kind of on high alert and scanning all the time for what's going on, what's happening, how things work, what's out there, etc., etc. And so to a certain extent, we are constantly being distracted by what is happening around us, which can make it very difficult for us to sit down and focus. Unfortunately, we don't only have COVID to think about. So many of us, including me, are still trying to run a business or go to work or sort out the kids or figure out home or make sure we've got enough groceries, etc., etc. So being able to think of, try and get into a headspace where you can sit down and concertedly do some of those things and plan, hi Crystal, is an important part of being able to focus. So we're going to share some tips, but the first thing I really wanted to say is just be kind to yourselves. And be realistic. So, you know, if you're used to juggling 1,000 different balls and keeping everything going and being able to deliver loads of work in a short period of time, the reality is right now that's probably not going to happen, or certainly not to the same speed or pace of delivery that you would have done in the past. And that's okay. So to some extent, part of this is about thinking about what is really realistic for me to achieve in the run of a day, given I'm likely sharing space with a partner or kids or got other things going on that I need to be worrying about. Hi Crystal, if you have questions, please ask as you go throughout the session. I'm happy to answer anything as we go along. But yeah, so the first thing I wanted to just say was be kind to yourselves. If you don't tick everything off on your to-do list in the run of a day, that is fine. Look at what you didn't do at the end of the day, figure out what's actually important and critical, and make sure it's the priority for the next day. But be realistic. If you've got 19 things on your to-do list, it's not going to get done. Good rule of thumb is the brain can cope with about 3 things at any one time, right? So in this situation, I'd say 2. So I'd pick the 2 things you want to get done in the run of a day and focus on doing those 2, and then be thrilled if you manage to accomplish anything else. So that would be the first thing I'd say. Be kind to yourselves, and if you don't tick everything off on your to-do list, it's all right. So I'm going to share a couple of tips that are kind of short-term things that you can do in order to help yourself focus in the moment, and then I want to talk a little bit about helping you and your brain be focused in the longer term, because there are some things we can kind of work on that can help us to focus. So in terms of short-term tips, there's kind of 4 things that I want to talk about. The first is about eliminating noise and distraction, and I'm sure a few of you are laughing now because you're at home like I am with kids and dogs and pets and spouses and people trying to share the same office as you and everything else. I actually do mean that kind of distraction and noise, but I also mean noise that goes on in your own heads. So distractions in terms of the house, the more that you can create a space for yourself where you can work, the better and easier it will be for you to figure that out. And in our house, we've had to carve that space out. The kids are upstairs, I'm downstairs, Mike's in a separate room. We kind of share and split that space depending on what I'm doing. So like this morning, where I kind of didn't want a Nerf gun war going on at the same time as me doing this video, we've got some different spaces where we can go to kind of have the quiet that we might need to be able to focus. So carving out that space is really important. And the last video I did, I talked a bit about setting yourself up to work productively from home, and space is one of the things that I talked about. But I also mean the internal noise that goes on. So part of what stops you from being able to focus is your head kind of going to 1,000 different things at once. And in this type of situation, I think that's very normal, but it will get in the way of you being able to sit down and concertedly pay attention to something. So there's a few things that you can think about when you're doing that. So one is our brains process and create worry because we need something to do. So in some ways, getting into a task will actually help because it will occupy your mind and stop you from doing those things. But the other thing that can show up that's kind of anxiety driven is what we call anticipatory anxiety. So you're winding yourself forwards and worrying about what might happen, what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen with my business, where are we going to be, is everything going to be okay, is there enough people going to self-isolate? And we start kind of doing the hamster on the treadmill and running through a bunch of things. That's all about the future, right? We're worrying about what might be and what possibilities might be out there. So a good way of helping yourself focus can be just about coming back to the present. And that can be as simple as picking something and actually looking at it, right? So in the run of a day, we'll look at things all the time. But to bring yourself back to the present without doing anything that's too far out there, like meditation for people, taking a second, take an object, like my calculator that's on my desk, and actually stop to look at the calculator and to look at the numbers and the buttons and what it's made of and touch it and turn it over. That will bring your brain back to right now and stop you winding forwards into things that you are worrying about for the future. So there's lots of kind of grounding exercises like that. They all help to bring you back to now, which will stop some of the noise going on in your own head. The other bit that's going to show up in noise and distraction is the joy of social media. Now, right now, for me, it's a completely double-edged sword. So on the one hand, it's a brilliant source of information. I'm getting to see what's going on in the province. I understand where the country is at. I know what's going on in the world, which is something that 100 years ago we didn't have. At the same time, social media is wired to distract your brain. So if your phone is chiming, if you've got alerts on there, if your email's going off, you will not be able to sit down and focus. So as much as it's really hard, you do need to try and think about how you limit screen time. So I actually have all the notifications on my computer switched off. They're on my phone, so if something significant happened, like an emergency alert, it would still show on my phone, but they're not on my laptop. So when I'm sitting down and doing work at my laptop, I'm not distracted in the same way. And in terms of social media, I've actually restricted myself to 4 times a day. So I can check it in the morning after breakfast. I can't check it when I first wake up because it doesn't start my day the right way. But I can check it after breakfast, I check it at lunchtime, I check it middle of the afternoon, and check it in the evening. And then I know what's going on, but it's not causing me to be distracted or lost in that anticipatory anxiety piece that can show up. I have a client who's awesome, who also manages phones in their dynamic, and they check their phones every hour on the hour for 5 minutes, and then you're expected to put your phone away. So that might be a good rule to think about with all of the social media pieces going on, if that's one of the things that is distracting you. So eliminating noise and distraction is not just about what goes on in your environment, it's also about getting yourself into that headspace. If you want to know more about that, please ask, or send me an email afterwards and I can send you some grounding exercises and things like that might help. So that's the first thing, noise and distraction. The second thing about helping you focus is about knowing what you're going to be doing. So our brains actually never like anything too big or complicated. They never have. And certainly in this environment where a big chunk of your mental capacity is on other things, we don't have the mental headspace to fathom how things are going to work. So if you're going to sit down and focus, you need to have 2 things clear in your head. One is, what are you trying to achieve? What's the outcome you want? And I don't necessarily mean it's a really clear visual outcome. I just mean that you know what you're trying to sit down and do, and you have some idea of the steps that you're going to take to go through it. If you don't know where you're going, your brain will procrastinate. So it will say, yes, I agree, that's important, but it's complicated, so I'm just going to put it over here for now and come back to it later. And right now there's lots of other things to occupy you, so that come back to it later will get pushed off and pushed off and pushed off and pushed off. So that's the first thing. Like, think about what you're trying to achieve. And then the second thing is breaking up what you're trying to do into bite-sized chunks. So thinking about breaking things down into smaller pieces or smaller steps to accomplish them, laying things out, figuring out what you can do of a task today and then what you can do of that task to tomorrow. Particularly if it's something that you find difficult, complicated, or don't enjoy doing. In the current climate and situation, your brain's going to go, I'm going to put that off and put it over here. So the more that you can break things down into smaller pieces and deliverables, the better. All right. And the other thing to think about is to really try and use the times of the day in a way that works best for you. And actually, that's a bit of a positive in the current way of working. So now many of us are working remotely. We still have deliverables, but we're not in an office environment, so we're not as effective by what's happening around us. You will all have your own energy levels at different times of the day, different things that you want to do, different ways at times that work for you. So use them, right? Like, I'm not super great first thing in the morning, so that's the time I don't do anything too complicated. I'm better late morning or late afternoon. I can schedule more easily when I'm at home than I can when I'm in the office. So thinking about what times of day do you focus best and how can you structure your day around them can also help you focus. So those are the things I'd say. So eliminate noise and distraction. So that's not just noise in the environment, it's what's going on in your own heads and the things that are causing you to come out of the present and go worry about something. Make sure you're really clear on what you're trying to achieve and that the size of what you're working on right now is reasonable. So if it's not an action you can accomplish in a day, that's not the right size action for you to take. So try and break things down into those pieces, and think about when in the day you work best so you can use your energy to best and fullest effect in the run of a day. So those are my kind of short-term tips. Does anyone have any questions on any of those, or sitting there thinking, I don't know how to do that, or I don't know how any of this makes any sense? Then please just type your question in and I will, hi Cindy, I will do my best to answer them. All right. So eliminate noise and distraction, have a clear goal, be very clear on what it is you're trying to do, break it down into smaller pieces and work at the times of the day as best you can that are better for you in terms of your energy level. The other thing that I just wanted to talk a little bit about are more long-term things that can help you focus. So, we don't know how long we're going to be in a remote working situation with everybody, around us, or have these things distracting us and going on. So there's a couple of things that can make a difference to how our brains work and our ability to focus long-term that it's worth paying attention to. Welcome. Okay, so Crystal said, how should you adjust your expectations of your team? Good question. So I'll come back to the long-term stuff and answer Crystal's question. I think it's about so I think there's two things there. I think there's one, the team recognizing that they're also not going to be running as fast as they normally would. And there's also your performance expectations. So with the team, I think it's as simple as having the conversation and talking about the fact that we are likely not going to be as focused and productive as we normally would be because there's so much going on. Let's talk about what reasonable looks like. Let's talk about how we accomplish those things so that they aren't concerned about what they're able to accomplish. And certainly for people who are in shared accommodation or have dependents at home, like, there's a lot of distractions in the workplace, so there needs to be a degree of realism around how we manage that and talking about how to do it and sharing tips with each other. The other part of that equation is you being able to effectively judge the performance of your team. So in the past, you would have been looking at it and going, okay, people need to be able to produce this. That's my definition of good. In this current context, what does good now look like? What are you comfortable with? So there will be a balance between what you need them to accomplish to keep your business or your organisation running and what's really realistic for them to do that. And from my perspective, that's really just a question of trial and error. I'm perhaps more able to balance lots of balls than other people in my team are. So how do I'm talking to them and working with them and asking them okay, I've set this for you today. Is this good? Were you okay with what you did yesterday? What didn't get done? And having more conversation about what they've managed to accomplish and how they're feeling, so that I can more effectively judge how they're doing. And it can be tempting to think that people, when they're working from home, like, don't do stuff or find ways to get around doing things. But really, in the current situation, I think that's, if that happens at all, I think it's in the real minority. I think that most people would be glad to have something to sit down and do right now in a lot of cases, and have something that will take their mind off what's going on. So really for me, it's just sitting down at the beginning of the day. I'll check in and say, okay, where are we? What do you need to do today? Here's what I was thinking. How do you feel about that? What didn't get done yesterday? And make sure that they're comfortable being able to deliver on what's on their plate, and that they're in the mental headspace to be able to accomplish those things, because some of it is how are they feeling affecting whether they can sit down and focus. Crystal, does that help? Give me a thumbs up if that covers enough of the bases for you. Cool. Any other questions from anyone on the current tips that I shared before I talk about the long-term pieces? Yes, so Heather's saying, I find having a tidy space helps with concentration. I would totally agree. It was funny, on Saturday we had to move everything from our office back to the house. We had to move out of our current office because we'd already signed a lease to move somewhere else. We had to be out by the end of the month. So the house was filled with cardboard boxes, and I was like, I can't function like this. I can't work like this. I need space. So we took some time over the weekend to clear that space, which is what allows me to sit down and focus. Different people are different. Everyone has the same requirements around that. But if you like space, then when you do your setup and you set yourself up at home, make sure it's a place that you actually have what you need to function. Crystal, okay, that's good. Perfect. All right. So the last two pieces that I wanted to touch on were about longer term things. So, the provincial government here in Newfoundland has suggested that this will possibly go on until July, right? So we have a good couple of months, if everybody self-isolates appropriately, of figuring out how to do this stuff and finding ways to stay focused. So I shared some of the if you're in the moment and struggling tips a minute ago. These two things I want to talk about are about kind of more retraining your brain, or what your brain needs on a longer term basis. So the first is sleep. And your brain does most of its work while you're asleep. If you're not getting enough sleep, that will have a fundamental impact on all kinds of things, one of which is focus, but the other is also mood, all right? So, when we sleep, our brains process information, and they process what experiences we had that day. And my understanding is, from the studies I've done, that the brain processes negative experiences first. So if you don't get enough sleep, what you're only ever encoding is the bad stuff, right? Which is why they think there's correlation between sleep and depression and anxiety and other things. You certainly won't be able to focus and concentrate in the same way if your brain hasn't had the time it needs to process all the information that you absorbed in the run of a day. So sleep is fundamental. If you're not getting enough sleep, that's absolutely something I pay attention to. If you're finding it difficult to sleep at night, especially those of us who've got kids who are running around and everything else, you can nap, right? Now is a great time to reintroduce the afternoon nap. I had a sleep professor in our last course who was a huge advocate of napping in the afternoon, like you used to do at kindergarten. So now might be the time to reintroduce the nap. 20-minute nap will boost your energy. A 90-minute nap will actually take you through a sleep cycle and help you process information. The one thing you don't want to do is nap for an hour, because if you nap for an hour, you haven't completed a sleep cycle. So you'll kind of wake up halfway through what you're doing and you'll be groggy. That feeling of when you wake up happens at that point when you wake up. So 20 minutes to boost your energy, 90 minutes to kind of boost your processing, but sleep is fundamentally important. Make sure you're getting enough sleep. If you don't do anything else as a result of this conversation, sleep would be the thing I'd say pay attention to. The other thing that can help with our brains is meditation. Now, I know meditation isn't necessarily something everybody's passionate about, or a lot of people are like, I don't know if that's for me. There is proven research that talks about the impact of meditation on your brain and how it strengthens your brain's ability to do certain things, including giving focused attention to something. So different types of meditation affect different parts of the brain differently. but taking that time to meditate or to pause, at least pause and pay attention to something, can make a big difference to your brain's ability to set that mental noise aside and come back to concentrate. So personally, I've always struggled to maintain a meditation habit. I know how good it is for you. I know how important it is, but fitting it into my day is something that I found really difficult. I am making a concerted effort right now to meditate every single day, because it is something that will calm you, and it is something that will help you be able to park that mental noise that goes on and come back to focusing on the task that you need to do. So I know that it's not always something that everybody's thrilled about, but it's worth going and looking at the science behind it if you're dubious about meditation, because there are definite correlations between what goes on in your brain and the way that we meditate. If you really can't bring yourself to meditation, if that's something that's just too far out there for you, and I do know some people who are in that frame of mind, that's fine, it's your world and your life. Other activities can help produce similar effects. So painting, baking, DIY, things that allow you to lose yourself in the doing of the task will have benefit. It's not as good as meditating, it's not the same as meditating, but if that's just a stretch too far for you, then making sure you build some of those activities in can still have the same benefit in terms of you being able to set some of that mental noise aside. So over the long term, if you want to work on your focusing ability, enough sleep and things like meditation can actually improve the way that your brain functions and allow you to function and focus better on an ongoing basis. So those were my tips for today. So some short-term tips if you're struggling in the moment to sit down and do something, and a couple of longer-term kind of train your brain tips. Does anyone have any last questions before we wind up and go about our day? So Gail's saying she's being aware of the internal noise is really important. Yeah, I mean, a lot of what's stopping us people from focusing right now when I have conversations with them is where all the places their brains are going. So that piece of coming back to now, stopping thinking about all the scenarios and planning everything, do some grounding activities to bring you back to here and now, get clear on the outcome that you want to accomplish in your task. That will bring you back to present and help you stay focused there. Any other questions from anyone before we wrap up? So we are gonna, like I said at the beginning, this video will be saved and we will put it out on the newsletter that goes out next week. No, maybe later this week, depending on what I manage to accomplish and how focused I get to be. The other couple of things I'd share is for those of you who are working and finding yourself now leading a virtual team, so you never used to, your team used to be there and now you're virtual, we've made our Leading Virtual Teams program available to anyone who wants to do it for free. So I did put the post up on our E3 page. You can just go into our guest section of our online training site, register and do the course, and it's completely free. The only thing you have to give us is your email address. It will put you into our distribution list, so know that, but you can unsubscribe at any time. Hopefully though you won't want to, because you'll find all the information we're sharing very helpful. So that's there for you, as well as some of the tip sheets, and we're sending out about one newsletter a week right now with information, videos, tips and etc. So if there's something you'd like to know about, whether that's managing stress or how to be most productive, or you just got questions about the HR side of things, anything like that, about how do I find my way through this, please send them through to us and we can either provide that information or a resource, or put it forward to somebody that we know in our network who will be able to help you with that. All right, so happy to help in any way that we can right now. We're all in this together, even though we're in separate places. That doesn't affect the community spirit, so anything we can do to help, just feel free to ask. All right, stay safe everybody, stay 6 feet apart. We will find a way through this. It's just going to take a bit of time and everybody needs to do their piece, and if there's anything we can do to help you, then just reach out. All right, thanks everybody, take care and connect if you need to, and we'll be talking to you soon. All right, bye.